Hey, it's Curly. Sorry this video is a little bit late. I usually like to do these on the anniversary or usually as close as possible to it. But I had a couple of reasons for wanting to delay it. One was, of course, because of the roadmap announcement that happened this last Friday. And I was pretty sure that that was going to affect how at least the ending of this video was going to turn out. There's also something that is happening at the end of this month, and I was going to wait until after that to do this video, but I think it's probably a little bit more appropriate to just do it now. I also wanted to sort of have a whole week where it was just kind of rambling about Vanguard. So it was going to be this video, it was going to be a new state of Vanguard, looking at it, in the state that it is now, and then doing something like a state of overdress. So essentially I just had a lot of grievances that I wanted to air out, but a lot has changed since I've wanted to do that. So we're just going to stick to this video now and we'll see what happens from there. But enough of, I guess, an introduction. This is my third and what we now know, my final year with Vanguard 0. So we left off the second year on kind of a bit of a sour note, which is kind of disappointing because the first year was one of my favorite videos, one of my favorite experiences I've ever had in a real long time. And I remember reading a comment from Pablo, my good friend who I've played a lot of Vanguard with, specifically Vanguard 0, saying how, video was pretty depressing, all things considered. And I saw that comment and I totally agreed. That was way more depressing than I thought it would be and hoping it would be. So, in order to make sure that the third year was better, I set a notification on my calendar every month to just sort of recollect on what happened 0-wise, and to make sure, one, that I kept note of all these things so that, this video would be a little bit more spicy, but also two, I wanted to make an active effort to have a lot of good memories this year, because even then, I guess you could see maybe that the writing could possibly be on the wall. So I wanted it to be, if it were the last year, it would be a good last year. So I'll pick up where we left off in April 2022 with G-Set 5, which gave us support for Pale Moon, Grand Blue, and I think it was Aquaforce, or maybe it was Bermuda. But this was the first time that Pale Moon got support in the G series, which was really cool because I haven't been able to play Pale Moon in a long time, ever since they stole Marichika and Anna's powers. I just haven't been able to play the clan as much as I did originally. The majority of my Vanguard experience or Vanguard 0 experience was just going through the Pro League, which was just a league set up by the community for players to create teams and face off against each other. And my team actually made it into the playoffs, which is in general an experience that I wish I had covered a lot better in the previous video, but I did not. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go into it much right now because as soon as we got into the playoffs, we had our first match. It was a 3-match series, so the first to win 2 matches would advance to the next stage, and whoever lost is automatically eliminated, right? We're in an elimination round now. And basically, I think the same day that our match was supposed to happen, one of our teammates actually lost their whole ass Vanguard 0 account. Apparently their phone did something where if you hadn't used an app in a while, it clears it up, uninstalls it, or removes the data or whatever just to free up space on the phone. Apparently that happened to his account, and he hadn't backed it up on anything, so there's no way to get access to it. So we had a really weird and dramatic start to our first playoff match there, where we were just down a team member. We did manage to have a sub who managed to sub in and play at the time, but it really did not matter because we just got completely obliterated in our first match of that series. I remember my game specifically, I just was not able to do anything. I couldn't get any defensives in hand. I had, I think, 2 BGs that went to damage, 2 that went to the bottom of my deck, and then I whiffed the heal, so I just had no way of defending myself. I was playing Nova Grappler, and I think I took Grand Blue as my second deck. It was a 2-deck format, and once you win with one deck, you have to switch to the other deck. And then I tried to go for Nova Grappler again, and then in the second game, I got, I might have gotten Great Stuck for a bit, and then I couldn't get my Victor to stride into, or to ride into, so that I can stride more effectively. Instead, I had to ride my Yamana the Drake, which was the other grade 3 that I played in the deck, which obviously did not end up well for me. I did the best that I could, but it did not go well. Same for the rest of our team. So we were pretty distraught here. We had done pretty well in the playoffs, but I think just a combination of what happened right before the match, not being prepared or whatnot, we did not go into it with our best strengths. So we were down one match. Then our next match was coming up, and we all tried our best to like level up and make sure that we can make it past into at least the third match, because our friend, or our teammate, who was had their account missing, was able to get in contact with support, and they were able to get their account back. It's just that they had to wait 2 weeks. So for our next match, if we were able to win that match and tie up the score, make it 1-1, for the final decisive one, we would come in with full power, because, you know, our teammate would be here, right? The teammate that we went through the entire first rounds with. And I, in preparation, tried to do a lot of grinding with Angel Feather, because that was the deck that I thought would do pretty well at the time. I really wanted to learn Pale Moon and play it, but I just could not figure it out for the life of me how it was supposed to function at that point in time. So I was still struggling with that, so I decided instead to bring in Grand Blue, which is another deck from that new set that was really good at the time. And then Pablo was playing Gear Chronicle, that's like his favorite clan, and he was able to finally pull a second Next Stage. So Next Stage needs 2 copies of it in your G-Zone, so you can flip one. He didn't have both of them, because he just wasn't able to pull it, and he was able to just pull it right before the match, which was pretty cool. And we went into our match. I usually go first. For the entirety of our Pro League career for this team, we went first. I went first, I should say. And this was the first time where instead they put me as last, as like the anchor. And first up went our sub, Fox Spirit Sama. And unfortunately, I think they like decked out with Pale Moon and just could not do much in the second game. So we took our first loss in this, match there. Then came up our captain, Mr. Light, who I think he went up with like Narukami up against Bermuda Triangle, and it was just a complete washout because it was just completely mixed matched. So we were down, right? So the way it works is that out of I think 4 players, you play 2 games each, and whoever gets the most out of that, takes the match. So next up, we had Pablo, and if Pablo lost a single game, the other team would have 5, wins over us, and they would just automatically advance, win the match with no series. But Pablo just went ahead and went full anime protagonist mode, because I don't remember which 2 of the games it was, but I just remember him doing these crazy plays where we were just like, what the hell are you doing? And I just remember at one point he just went into Next Stage when he could have just done other things, but he just went into Next Stage like, I don't care, discard all my PGs, do all this crazy shit. And then by the grace of anime and God, he just went through it and won the match somehow. So he managed to win both his games, and then it came up to me, and we were still in a position, right, where if I lost, team automatically advances, because they had 4 wins to our 2 now. So I had to win 2 just to tie it up, and then we would play an additional game to decide the winner. Like I said, I brought Angel Feather and Grand Blue for this, and I decided to go with Grand Blue after speaking with my team and looking at what my opponent was playing, and we ended up having a Grand Blue mirror match. And I remember early on, things were not really going in my favor. I was getting pushed a lot. And I also went first, so I strode second, which at that point in time was kind of a death sentence. And I noticed at the time that my opponent didn't go for as much of an aggressive turn as he maybe could have. He just kind of like set up 2 intercepts, which was a little bit rare for Grand Blue at the time, and kind of just swung in and pushed me. So I also saw that he, I think, had like checked PGs to the bottom of the deck or something like that, so I had a sneaking suspicion that he didn't really have a lot of defensives in hand. And when it finally came to my turn, for my first stride, I had two choices. I can go into the big ghost stride and try and set up for next turn and mill out the deck, maybe check some heals, check some draws to get cards in hand so I can guard for next turn, because obviously the Night Rose turn was coming after that, which was basically a kill turn. Or I can go into another first stride that was more aggressive, that has an on hit that lets you call out something from drop and try and, you know, win the game there. And I decided to go with the more aggressive play. I went in for the stride and I did all my things, and then I swung in trying to just end the game there, because I smelled blood in the water and I thought that I could end it there. But then my opponent checked the defensive heal and it just shut off any possibility I had to close out the game there. And then of course next turn they went into their Night Rose and just took me out, and we lost. That was it. We were out of the Pro Leagues. I remember speaking to my opponent briefly afterwards, asking them like what they had in hand or something like that, and it seemed like if it wasn't for the heal trigger, I maybe would have made the right call. But it's something that I've until recently forgotten about until I went back and looked at it now. But like that really haunted me for a while because I just did not know if I made the right decision, and I've never had that sort of like anime sports team moment or whatever where it's like, oh, what choice do I pass the ball or do I try to score the goal or whatever. So that really like haunted me for a while because I just wasn't sure if I really made the right choice. Even though there was no like real high stakes or anything like that, it was just mainly for fun. I just felt like I just really let the team down. I actually went on a flight to Florida the very next day because I needed to go take care of my father who was having surgery. So I had this sort of weird like little filler arc after my big anime moment, I guess. And I decided to spend that time trying to reconnect and learn Pale Moon, because I felt like maybe if I had played Pale Moon, maybe I would have had a better shot, but just in general, just because of Pale Moon being that really important clan to me from the first year, I figured I at least owed it that much to at least be able to play it, and I just really wanted to also play it. And also, it was in preparation for the next league that was coming up, which was another league that we were going to take part of with the same team, and I wanted to try and use Pale Moon for that, so I went ahead and I just did some training for that. It was pretty rough. Trying to learn the deck, I kept taking L after L and whatnot, and then having also the taste of defeat in my mouth and all that stuff, so it was pretty rough, on top of also my dad having surgery and all that stuff, so it was a pretty rough weekend. Not as fun and glamorous as I was hoping for. It wasn't even a weekend, it was like 2 weeks or something like that. But eventually I figured out the deck, and things started turning out for the better, and we started looking forward to the next league. Then next came May 2020, G-Set 6, which gave us support for Royal Paladin, Shadow Paladin, Kagero, Link Joker, Gear Chronicle, and Neo Nectar. Obviously, as you may have known for just watching the channel or just any of these videos, I don't really care about any of those clans, nor do I play any of them. But one very important thing that happened is the Neo Nectar support, because this is when we first got the Thria, which is a card in Neo Nectar, which is kind of infamous in Vanguard 0, because it made Neo Nectar pretty much tier 0. Before then, Neo Nectar was kind of just a deck where you maybe took it to tournaments, but that was about it. Only in situations when you knew the matchup, maybe then you can play it, because it just died to a lot of removal. So they got a card that had many effects, including resist, which means that it cannot be targeted by any of your opponent's effects. In addition to that, it also got an additional effect that says where on place, it just takes the names of all of the cards that are on board. So Neo Nectar's thing in the G era was just having a lot of cards with the same name on board. So this card just lets you copy all of them. So you can very easily always have at least 2 of the same named card on board. The final big component for making this deck so strong was then the fact that they had the Jingle Flower, which was a stride that they got all the way in their first wave of support in the G era, that says you can G-flip, select a unit, and all of your other units, including your Vanguard, get, I think, like 2k for all of the number of units with the same name as the card that you selected. So since Thria copies everyone's name, everyone has a name that is in common, so it just gets a big power buff. And this power buff lasted until the end of your opponent's next turn. So you can very easily set up a board where you just have a full board of resist, where they just swing in for massive numbers. And on top of that, when it comes to your opponent's side, they then have to deal with these massive numbers that they just can't retire or remove by any other way than just attacking into it. And it was a very, very strong deck for a very long time, especially in the ladder. It's very oppressive. The only thing that didn't make it completely, like, I don't want to say it's completely tier 0, is that it was like a 4-stride deck, because you have to go into 1 stride first to enable a GB2, then you can go into Jingle Flower, but you usually won't finish the game out in your first Jingle Flower turn most times, so you have to go for it again. And that's maybe when you finish it off, depending on the deck, but in general, it wasn't until your 4th stride that you ended the game, right? So it was a very long and tedious deck to try and win a game with. And I was faced with the unfortunate situation that this was during Victor season. So for this month, at least the first half, the rank reward was for Victor, the card that I've fallen in love with, been using in Nova Grappler since it first started in the event. And I really wanted to try and see if for once I can get top 1 in the rank ladder this time, or at least get as high as I can. Of course, they came in the season where they dropped this crazy strong deck. But I actually ended up playing the crazy strong deck for once. Usually, I don't like playing what everyone thinks is the strongest deck, or the most powerful deck, or the most popular deck, or whatever the case may be. I usually stay away from those kind of things. But this time around, I was just like, no, I would like to win. So I started playing the deck. And it was the second most stressful time I've had, I think, with Vanguard 0. It was, I think, more stressful than when I was trying to climb for Lukier season, because of the fact that the Jingle Flower deck just took so long to end games. While your success rate for winning was maybe like 80-90% or something like that, if you put in all this time investment and then lost, it was just so devastating, right? Because the main thing about the rank ladder in 0 is that it's just a measure of how much time you can put into it. It's not so much how good you are, what the deck you play is, how good that deck is. That factors in very small, but it's really just how much time you're willing to commit to climb up, right? So if you spend a lot of time and then lose, you just lose a bunch of time that you'll never get back. If someone else just keeps winning and they just have all the time in the world to play 0, they will get to the top of the ladder. So I spent a lot of time struggling with that, just trying my best to climb as much as possible. Eventually I just ended up giving up and settling for 40th, I think it was, which is, as of right now, my career best highest rank. I did eventually manage to play other decks and have some fun, and I even managed to stream and make some friends with other people that were climbing the ladder as well, so that was a lot of fun. The stressing over trying to get first, not as much. Then we've got June 2022 G-Set 7, which gave us support for Golds, Angels, Kagero, and Dark E Regulars. I really liked Dark Irregulars, but they've never really had any good cards aside from Reggie, so I was really excited for this wave, and I had been building up crafting material ever since I saw they were announced on the JP side. And I finally got to get the cards, and I had a really good time. Dark Irregulars is probably not a big shock, but actually one of my favorite clans now. I used to only think that I really liked Pale Moon and Nova Grappler in terms of actual clans, but Dark Irregulars is very easily sneaking into a big tie for first there, just because of all the time I've played Barrel Magus in Standard. It's somewhat of a very similar playstyle to what Dark Irregulars can do. It was also around this time that we actually started that second league that I was talking about. And I'll be honest, I'm not going to go into much detail for this one, because this one was just an absolute failure. We lost, I think, every single game for this league, minus one where we got a bye, and then another one where I think I was the one that was playing, and I beat the first opponent, and then after that, the team just surrendered because the rest of their team just did not show up in time. So we just got a fluke wing there. It was a very disappointing league, to be honest. I don't know what it was. It was just mismanagement on our team's part or the league's part. Because, there was a lot of things that were going on in the community at the time. But it just did not feel anything like the fun and the high of the first, league. This just felt like it just fell flat, and it was really disappointing, unfortunately. Later on, we ended up, me and Pablo, trying to do a last chance qualifiers to get our team in, but we ended up losing in the first round. I remember, I think Pablo just could not get things going. He just had really bad RNG, and then I think I slightly misplayed on my last turn, and then we just both ended up losing. I kind of wish things had gone better with that league, but unfortunately it did not. What I was really more focused about around this time was actually the Nova Grappler Clan Event 2 that happened at the time. I believe it was the second one. And this time around, I saw that I couldn't make it first in the ranked reward, so I thought, okay, I'll make it first in the clan event. Let's do that at least. And I did manage to make it first, pretty quickly. And I kind of had a couple of competitors pulling in for first, but then I just kind of pulled in really far ahead and blew them out of the water, and a lot of them just kind of gave up and were like, all right, whatever. We're just going to get our rewards and move on. And eventually someone else caught up. It was the winner from the first clan event who got first, who, for whatever reason, wanted to get another first, even though the rewards are exactly the same. And I entered this sort of war with this person for those 2 weeks. And this was the most frustrating experience I had. Ranked with Victor was pretty frustrating, but this was the absolute worst, because I was just on my phone or on BlueStacks constantly trying to climb up and stay in first, and we were just constantly trading back and forth between first and second, first and second, first and second, first and second. I think I'm just gonna talk out of my ass here and say it anyways, but I think we hit a record for the highest amount of clan points for any of the clan events between first and second or anything like that, because we were 100, maybe not 100, but a million points ahead of third place, right? And I just kept on going, but then eventually I just had to tap out, because in order to do that, it is just a huge time investment, but also a huge money investment. And I had what I guess is a sunken cost fallacy, where I just kept going and going, and then I was just well, I've already invested so much so far and spent so much time, I just have to keep going to make it all worth it, and just kept going, and then eventually I just came to my senses and tapped out and got second. But that was one of the most crushing experiences, just the fact that for 2 weeks straight, for two weeks straight, right? 2 different periods of 2 weeks, I just constantly had to be grinding, trying to get first, and it was just not a lot of fun. It took out a lot for me, and I was not having a great time with the game. On top of the stuff that was going on with the league, and still be disappointed from the previous league, my morale for Zero was at an all-time low. And I had kind of set a bucket list for myself, because again, I went into this year thinking this might be the last year of Vanguard 0, and there was a lot of things that I wanted to just maybe accomplish before the year ends, or at least before the game ends, I should say more specifically. And well, I just kind of missed out on 2 of those, and I probably would not get another chance to do that, so I was pretty down at this point. Then we had July 2020 with G Set 8, which was an extremely controversial set, where they decided they were going to release 2 sets at once. So rather than having the one usual set that supported a specific number of clans, they released a side Blessings and a side Judgment for the same set, which each supported different clans. There was essentially 2 booster boxes at the same month, right? Which they've only really did in the very beginning, where they released the game out to global. They combined sets 2 and 3 to help us catch up to where the Japanese players were, because I think we were 4 months behind, or 5 months, and just put us ahead to 3 months. And then it was a lot easier, because 1, the game was brand new, so you had a lot of the free-to-play currency that you can mess around, the stamina, the gems and stuff, and also they gave you a bunch of like packs and stuff to soften the blow of having 2 sets to catch up on. Here they didn't really do that, and then this is sort of where the like impending doom and the, I don't want to say specifically distrust, but the unhappiness in the community really started to get extremely loud, because everyone saw this as a way for the developers to milk as much money from their community as they can and sort of just speedrun all of the content that's left that they can possibly produce, and then just dip. Goodbye, deuces, end of service. It was fun knowing you, kid. And that was just the sort of general feeling that was going on with most of the community. And it had been a feeling that was always around since, I want to say, the beginning of G, but here it just hit its fever pitch, and it just never quieted down from there, unfortunately. I ended up going for the side blessings because it had support for Grand Blue, Pale Moon, Neo Nectar, and Bermuda. Aside from Neo Nectar, I liked a lot of the other clans, and I really wanted to try out the new Pale Moon some more, even though it really did not do much for Pale Moon per se, but it was nice to have some more support. But between this and the general unrest that was in the community and then losing in the league again, I decided to take a small break from Vanguard J at this point in time. Then we had G-Set 9 in August 2022, which had support for Gold Paladin, Angel Feather, and Aqua Force. But this was another controversial set because it came with Luard, which was a unit for Shadow Paladin, which was extremely popular. And he mainly focused around having grade 1s, having them in your drop in order to enable effects. But unfortunately, this led to what is been known as zero damage Luard, which is just a playstyle or deck that focuses on not giving your opponent any damage, and then eventually you winning the game by either decking them out or just beating them all in one turn. There was a zero damage Fenrir version, or deck I should say, that was running around this time, or maybe came like into existence because of Luard. I don't know which one came first. That one was the more prevalent one, even though it was Luard that was definitely the bigger like demon, and that eventually had massive changes around it because of it. But this deck was running around rampant in ladder and kind of killed off the Japanese Vanguard Zero fan base, I think completely, right? I think that was kind of like the last straw, because there's just, you would run into a game and you just not be able to play because your opponent just wouldn't give you any damage, and then eventually they would just do a bunch of stuff like retire your whole board, make you discard a whole bunch of cards, and then swing in with like 5 crits, or just let you deck out because they could easily put cards back into their deck. So things weren't great, to say the least. Once it came for our side, they didn't make it as bad for the global side, because on the Japanese side they had that deck at like full power, but on the global side they implemented some changes right away to make sure that the same thing didn't happen to us. But even then, the deck still kind of did its thing to an extent. It just wasn't as easy, but the damage had been done, I think, to the Japanese side at this point, and I don't think they ever recovered from that. I think that was it. They weren't, I think, in a good spot at all, especially after like side blessings and Jingle 3. Like, this was it. So for all intents and purposes, all that was left was the global Vanguard Zero community. I am just kind of saying it's off word of mouth for the most part, because I wasn't really playing a lot of Vanguard Zero at the time. As I said, I was taking a break, and I was mainly just playing more of the TCG, so Overdress, and just playing a bunch of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 at this time. And that didn't change in September with G-Set 10, which had support for Royal Paladin, Gear Chronicle, and Neo Nectar. There wasn't really a lot for me to care about here, because there wasn't a lot of, obviously, clans that I cared about in this set, and it was just mainly focused on the main characters from the G era. So I was still taking my break. But something that did happen this time around was the Longtime Player Appreciation Awards. So this was something that was given specifically to the global fan base, so not the Japanese side, where they had been talking about it for a while, where it was a way to give back to the players that have been, playing the game for a long time, And basically how it works is that based on the cumulative amount of days that you actively played the game, logged in, they would continuously give you rewards. So if you logged in for 100 days, you would get all the rewards up to 100 days, and then going further, you continue getting rewards, right? And it was massive. This was the most gracious the game had ever been. This is the most amount of rewards anyone had ever gotten for anything. I myself here was able to get myself enough stride spears for 4 GRs from this one reward campaign. Stride spears are obviously infamous for not being easily accessible other than just getting multiple copies of cards, or in clan events getting multiple copies of cards. That was the only really way that you can get stride spears other than deconstructing SPs. So the fact that I was able to get 4 GRs worth of stride spears from one event was just massive, insane, right? I still got a bunch of other stuff, but that's really all that mattered. I was able to get a G structure deck. I was able to get tickets for GRs. I was able to get 4 tickets for triple Rs, 2 whole playmats. So I got, like, I think enough Omni medals for playmats, and then 60 packs. I don't remember what those 60 packs were, but I managed to get like 60 packs. I think I mentioned the playmats before, but they're just something exclusive against the global side, where it's just literally a playmat on the game, and then you use Omni rewards to just exchange for it. And then they also had the G structure deck, which I don't know if I mentioned, but it's just an evolution of the original super decks. It's just in the G era. They're of course very expensive, so getting these for free, or at least one of them, was very much appreciated. So even though the set really didn't have anything I cared about, I still actually managed to get into the game a little bit here, because obviously these rewards were massive, and I was actually able to play Angel Feather, pick them back up with their new support now that I had all of this, material to actually build out the deck. And here's when I actually made a very interesting decision for something that I've been wanting to do for this channel and for Vanguard Zero in a while, where I just made a brand new free-to-play account. Starting from scratch. I basically did like a walkthrough tutorial series where I went all the way from the beginning of even getting blue stacks, downloading the game, and getting started, all the way up to, wherever it is that I left off, just for it to sort of help out new players at the time, to serve as just a sort of walkthrough, because a lot of the older ones that were done by other content creators were obviously outdated, because a lot has changed since the beginning of the game, right? And at this point, I was playing 2 different accounts, and I was actually starting to have a little bit of fun with Vanguard Zero again. And that fun continued into October 2022, where we got Fighters Collection 2. We also managed to get a HoloLive collab, which was really cool, because I think this happened simultaneously on the Japanese side and the English side, or the global side, which never happened for like any other event, right? Other than I think like the birthday events, that's the only thing where the 2 servers were in sync like that. So it was pretty huge. It was also huge in that the HoloLive cards were original cards for Vanguard Zero. These aren't cards that exist in the TCG. They had their own unique effects. And that's something that the community really wanted to see more of in Zero, because Zero is not straight up a simulator for the TCG. It's its own thing. And had the developers leaned in more into that, had Bushiroad, had GameSoda, whoever it is, leaned more into that, I think the game would have ended up a lot better. We saw some shades of this earlier with the Chariot, how it just kind of like spawns cards that don't exist, similar to like something like Hearthstone and stuff, where it just kind of messes around with the fact that you're playing a digital game, right? But yeah, this month was great, because between the HoloLive collab, getting players back in, between Fighters Collection, giving support to a bunch of clans, between the long-term appreciation awards, bringing players back in, things were great. And I was having the best time with Vanguard Zero at this point, because I was just trying out different decks. Everyone on the ladder was using different decks. Everyone wasn't just using the standard meta decks at the time, because they just wanted to try out things, and there was just more players in general. People were actually on Twitter talking about Vanguard Zero, so it was great. And on top of that, specifically in Twitter, we had the global Vanguard Zero account actually reaching out and talking to the community and whatnot. So it just felt like the game was alive. In such a long time, it finally felt like the game was actually alive again, right? It looked like things were just going great, because, I mean, we had gotten just about almost everything we could ask for, aside from the obvious major changes to the game, but we finally got some sort of rewards. We finally got some interaction from the actual, developers and whatnot. So things were going great. Then we go into November 2022 with G-Set 11, which I think just had support for Pale Moon, Grand Blue, and Bermuda Triangle. And this would have been amazing for me, because I really like these clans and I really like the cards that are in this set. However, November was a horrible time for Vanguard, if I'm being honest. At least Vanguard Online, in terms of the online community, was having a horrible time. Not so much specifically things with Zero per se, but things with the actual TCG, right? So the first thing was that they had a new set for Lyrical and Overdress that within the set was going to have a NFT campaign. So if you pulled an LSR, which was the highest rarity of that set, you would then have a voucher to like exchange that online for an NFT of the card. And this is a campaign that is similar to something Bushier had done before with Vanguard Zero, but it had really flown under the radar and people didn't find out about that first campaign until like 7 months after it happened or something like that. This was kind of immediately attacked and backlashed as soon as it was discovered. Then on top of that, in that same month, we were supposed to get the release of Deer Days, which was going to be a brand new way to play Vanguard in video game form, which hadn't had in many years aside from Vanguard Zero. And there was a lot of sort of, unrest about the game. Once we finally found out the pricing, things got immediately worse. Aside from the fact that we wanted it to be a sort of master duel client where it was constantly getting updates and it was just a sort of client that can be used to play the actual TCG. This was a more story-based game. It did not have a free-to-play model like Master Duel. Instead, it had a flat price. But this flat price was higher than any other game that was basically in existence, because it started that trend. I don't know if it was this game specifically, but it started a trend of now games costing $70, $69.99 instead of $60 or $59.99, at least here in the States. And this was done for regional pricing, so certain areas actually got this game for what was equivalent to like $20, whereas other areas got it for what was equivalent to like $100. It was very, very not great. And then as things couldn't get any worse, on top of all of that, they then announced the prices for the DLC, which were double the amount for the game. So it was in total like $140, $150 altogether. And on top of what happened with the lyrical thing, this happening right afterwards, and the fact that they also decided to release the game, I think like a day before Pokemon releases, which obviously if people had the choice between playing Pokemon and Deer Days, everyone's going to choose Pokemon. And Deer Days could have been this huge thing that could have brought in a lot of new players into the game, but instead it was just the launch of it and everything was just done completely horrible. So that whole vocal, I guess, minority from before just grew exceptionally loud, and there was a lot of discourse and a lot of arguments, specifically on Twitter. And it just really sucked, honestly. I had gotten to the point where I just didn't even want to play Vanguard as a whole at all anymore, because I just felt so annoyed, and I got to the point where I just even felt guilty for even buying cards. It just sucked. November just sucked. To top all things off, the Vanguard Zero Global Twitter account that was being very active before disappeared. Basically went radio silent. All they would do now is just post news, basic news, very frequently, infrequently, and not really engage with the community as much as they were before. It was just a complete 180 from what was going on the last 2 months, where things looked like it was great, nature was healing, and now everything just went to shit. In between all of this, I focused most of my time on Deer Days, not so much on Vanguard Zero. Then we had December 2022 with G-Set 12, which gave us support for Warrior Paladin, Kagero, Nubatama, and Dark Irregulars. I saved up again for Dark Irregulars, so I really liked Dark Irregulars, but I didn't like this wave of support as much. But this set was really known for Nubatama, who basically on drop was one of the best decks for all of Vanguard Zero's existence, just because it was so strong and overpowered. It was another sense of those power creeps. Zero had this problem where they would just drop a deck that is way better than all the other decks, and then eventually, in a couple of sets, they'll receive support for all the other decks to kind of catch up to that deck's power level. But there's always like 1 or 2 outliers that are just massively stronger than on the other ones, and then eventually everyone else catches up. So yeah, I was just taking a small break from Zero, just played Deer Days, and eventually we got a like big dump of information, just Vanguard news, and a lot of it was really good. But a lot of things people noticed was that Zero did not really get any big announcements, which was very concerning, because we had started seeing a very big trickle down of information for Vanguard Zero. Before, they would, show us a lot of stuff beforehand. Now, maybe the day or two before the set drops in Japan, they would just start releasing cards and like, oh yeah, here's what's coming. So things were getting very, very dire very quickly. January 2023, we're in the new year now, with G-Set 13 gave us support for Shadow Paladin, Nubatama, Gear Chronicle, Bermuda Triangle, and Neo Nectar. I was really taking my break still at this time, so I wasn't really playing a lot. I did eventually start to stream Vanguard Zero, which was really fun, but this was around the time where we had the discourse about the price of the premium deck list, or deck sets, which was a new product which was releasing, something a lot of people really wanted for a long time, which were just constructed decks for premium, so people can start playing the premium format. But then, of course, again, the prices were released and everyone went into their usual discourse about it, and once again, things didn't seem too great. So I kind of just kept in my bubble, just played Deer Days for a bit more, and not so much Vanguard Zero. Whenever I did play Vanguard Zero, I would go up against Nubatama and not know how to play against the deck, and just not really care enough to try and figure out the deck, so I just stuck to Deer Days. Then we had February. Set, 14, which gave us support for Gold Paladin, Angel Feather, Kagero, Link Joker, and Aquaforce. As you can see, they've stopped doing supporting just 3 or 4 clans per set. Instead, they're just throwing in more in them, and this is also the first time where they threw in 8 GRs into one set. Before it was only 6, now they threw in 2 extra, which is kind of weird, because technically that means you have a higher chance of getting GRs because there's more of them in the set, and they did increase the amount of cards that are in the set. But at the same time, it's just more GRs in one box. GRs are still hard to get. I got really sick in February, so I didn't really do too much other than try and get better. And I spent a lot of March just trying to get back into the swing of things. The most I did here was play a little bit of Angel Feather. Then March came around with G-Set 15, and this was a massive set, because it gave support for Royal Paladins, Shadow Paladin, Nubatama, Link Joker, Dark Irregulars, Gear Chronicle, and Neo Nectar. Another massive set, another set that had 8 GRs, and also just a huge set because everyone got really good support. And it was at this point that I tried to start taking Vanguard Zero a little bit more seriously again. I started, trying to make more content, playing the game, getting into the meta. I managed to pick up Dark Irregulars again, and had a really good time, really fun time. It really invigorated my fun for the game because I was able to play it. I finally faced off against Nubatama and was able to actually, take them down now that I finally had the tools to actually play against them. I wanted to see if, again, I can cross off one of the things from my bucket list, which was to get first on the ladder, but also to qualify for the World Championships. So I tried to do that for the 2 seasons that I had left at that time, but I unfortunately could not make it. I put in a little bit of investment, but I just could not bear, after the other 2 times, 2 weeks of just agony of doing something like that straight, I just couldn't do it. So I just climbed a little bit, but nowhere near enough as I needed to. But my good friend Pablo actually did manage to qualify, so I expect him to be the new Spring Champion for Vanguard Zero. So then we finally get to April 2023 with G-Set 16, present day. This entire set was a set for Bermuda. But this is where things get really awkward, because on the Japanese side of things, they got a set where they didn't get a new set. They instead got a bunch of buffs and nerfs to some clans, but it was just a massive wave of buffs that came out of nowhere, where also no support and no word for, there hasn't been any word for a long time, but no word on what's happening in the future, what sets are coming out. In general, the game had run out of most of the G content that they go through. There were still more cards that they can print, and there were specifically leaks that showed that they were working on extra clan events and stuff, but there was no mention of what was going further. And the Japanese side didn't really say anything. There was no announcements in the usual streams where they talk about their products. And it was only on the Globo side for English where they announced that there was going to be a roadmap announcement coming soon. That's why this video was delayed, because the roadmap was at the end of the week of when, it was the end of the following week of when I wanted to post this video. So I waited for that. And, well, before we get into that announcement, I have an announcement myself that I've been, hinting at for a very long time. I'm actually going to be casting the open qualifiers for the Spring Championships. I'm going to be one of the commentators. So it'd be really nice if you guys can come and check me out. I'm very honored to have this privilege, and I'm looking forward to doing my best in this role. And here's where I cut out the rest of this for Twitter and seem happy and great, because the roadmap announcement was, of course, what we were all expecting and dreading, but they announced the end of service for Vanguard 0. Come June 29th of 2023, the servers for Vanguard 0 will be shutting down. And on the one hand, I can't say I'm surprised. I went into this whole year expecting this to happen. On the other hand, I just got this amazing opportunity to work with Bushiroad and cast an event for them. But it just kind of feels like, I don't know. I won't say I specifically worked up for this. I wasn't like, my end goal wasn't to be a commentator, right? That wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to be per se. But if it happened, that'd be great. But in general, it's just the recognition, right, that I've always been working hard for. Specifically now, recognition from the company that, makes the game that I've been playing and doing all this content for. But it just kind of feels like, I don't know, like there's this like super, like you're a musician, right? This is the only analogy that I can use to try to describe it to you guys. It's like you're a really good musician, right? You're making music, but you haven't been noticed, anything like that. And then one day this like band, this super popular band or whatever that you really look up to says, "Hey kid, join our band. You're going to be part of our band." And you're like, "Yes, finally, I got this chance." And then afterwards they tell you, "By the way, our band is going to end and disband in like 2 weeks, and we're just going to like no longer be a thing. But for now, you're part of the band." That's just kind of what it feels like. And then aside from like that feeling of, that, I don't know what that feeling is per se, there's just been this huge like hole in my heart, as corny as it is, and I really don't care what anyone thinks about what I'm going to say here, but as corny as it is, Vanguard 0 has been a huge part of my life. If these videos haven't been apparent since 2020, it came out in the pandemic. For many people, the pandemic was really rough. It was especially rough for me, and that's because, of course, of my history with my kidney disease. It's one thing to have this giant pandemic killer disease out there that can kill you. It's another thing to already have something killing you, and then now there's also a massive global threat or whatever the hell. So it was a very stressful time, especially since everything kind of hit at the same time. Like the pandemic started, but then also it was discovered that my condition was getting a lot worse, right? So Vanguard 0 just came at the literal perfect time. It was a month after I found out all this information, and it was just a good way to like distract myself and indulge in something while constantly not pacing around my house thinking about when I'm gonna die or whatever. And it also, allowed me to enjoy Vanguard, something that I always wanted to enjoy, but I just never really gave it a shot or just never really had the means to get into it. And it also gave me a sense of community. I actually had people that I can talk to about this game. I had that briefly with like Duel Links, but that was a completely different level than from what I experienced with Vanguard. It was just so much better, right? To just go into a random stream of someone playing the game and talk to them and have fun, and talk about it on Twitter and, have discussions in general. It just felt great. And then now, come 2 months from now, it's just all gone. And I haven't even been able to boot up the game since this announcement, because I don't know. It's something that even when I say I take a break from the game, I never actually take a break from the game. I still log in, do my dailies if there's an event, whatever. I just don't play it as much as I usually do. But for the last 3 years, I've played it very consistently. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's not the point. Point is that something that's been a huge part of my life for 3 years will now just disappear. And I don't know how to handle it. I don't really know how to handle that. I know I'll be fine, but it's just a huge change, really. Maybe it's my own fault for letting something be so important to me, but I don't think that's right. So that is about it for my third year, or my final year for Vanguard 0. I am very excited to be casting. I don't know if it's the casting per se, it's just finally being a part of it, and being recognized, that I'm really happy about. And I'm going to give it my all. And I don't know what I'm going to do content-wise for Vanguard 0, but I do know I want to try and go down with the ship, you will say. I don't want to just drop the game now. I want to give it as much as I can before it goes out. And what else can I say? Take care of yourself. Keep playing Vanguard. And have yourself a damn good one.